Beth was enjoying the party with her family, all of them not minding about having the sign most of the time. Then the Beth remembered the day when she met her foster mother. Beth laid in the bed, and all she could hear was nothing. But how could one hear nothing? When she was hearing, there was always white sound, someone annoying with something, a fan, the heater, or even the wind, which was just air and essentially nothing, but it was always making some sound somehow. What made Beth even more nervous was the fact that she couldn't even hear her own breath. Was she breathing? She sees movement in the corner of her eyes and watches as a couple walk in. They looked older than her parents, easily in their early 50s. Beth was scared. Who were these strangers? Why couldn't she hear? The man looked familiar. The lady looked excited though, and her husband was smiling wide as and was holding her down from bouncing all over the place. I can't hear! Beth panics, yelling loudly. She still could talk clearly. She talked slowly, feeling the words in her mouth and using them wisely. She felt like she was a kid again, not really having a clue that what the words were coming out of her mouth. But when she was little, it was because she didn't know what they meant. Now the game had changed. The man walks towards her nodding with a whiteboard in his hands. He writes it, telling her everything. She's been down for a few days sleeping. A lot of it had to do with the shock of blood coming out of her ears. Then she had to have a surgery to see if they can do anything. But they couldn't. They also have been trying to contact her parents, but it seems like they just dropped off the earth. Beth wasn't surprised that they left her. Their constant search of protest, they were terrible freak. Beth had seen better freaks that were kind and caring, wanting the best for their children, letting them have their own belief, and wanted them to have a great time at school. As they traveled and protested, one of her friend's parents who had a home but still were freaks, even though they had jobs, which was something that apparently devoted freaks couldn't have. Her parents just didn't care about her. Difficulty was the only word she could use to describe her parents. They barely remembered her birthday. Then again, until the authorities finds your parents, you are going to stay with us. We all are going to learn sign language. You are safe now. I had to stay in the hospital another day because I apparently was coming down from an addiction to a drug I didn't know I was consuming. The cop and his wife, Dean and Lisa, came to the hospital the next day with a speech therapist who would also spend the next 2 years teaching me American Sign Language. The cop and his wife treated me like I'm fragile at the first, but they were patient and loving. They took turns, kept Beth, who didn't know she was screaming in her sleep, calm. When one of them was next to her, she slept peacefully. Then Beth met my two elder foster siblings. The oldest was their son Leland, who was 22, and their daughter Frances, who was 20. The two siblings absolutely took the small, fragile redhead in. Leland taps Beth on her arms and she comes back to the present. And then he starts to science to her about what one of their dad's friends was saying. He signs the entire time, not pausing, and his movements fluid. After all of the dad's cop's friends had left. They all sat down in the living room watching a movie. Lee, Beth whispers. Beth was willing to talk around the family. Leland looks over his sister who was starting to fall asleep. He reaches over and taps on her hand. Stay awake, he signs to her with a huge smile on his face. He keeps Beth distracted while their mom sneaks into the kitchen and grabs a present. Then all of a sudden Lisa is in front of Beth with a box. It had drawn the entire family's attention. She looks at everyone confused. Dean and Lisa was nervously from their seat. Open it, Lisa signs to Beth. Beth carefully unwraps the present and opens the box. She looked confused as she sees blank paper. She picks up the paper and sees that it was a thick stack of paper. Leland reaches over and flips it. Beth reads the top. Adoption. Beth's eyes read over the word multiple times. She looks up, panicking. Dean walks over and kneels in front of Beth. We want to adopt you, since we already think you are our child. Dean signs. Beth was crying. Wow! Beth exclaims out loud. Dean smiles softly. Yes, I love you, Dad. Beth signs. Dean immediately pulls Beth into his arms, crying. Lisa had rushed over and was hugging the two as well. Frances was crying happily that her sister was actually going to be her sister. Everyone pulls apart and Beth laughs a little as she wipes her tears from her eyes. I still think our present to you is better, Beth signs to him. Dean laughs and shakes his hand and his head. Frances walks up to her father and hands him a fancy small box. He laughs and opens it and smiles widely. To Finland, he signs to his children in disbelief. Leland smiles and wraps his arms around his shoulders. Yes, I believe it. Frances signs, showing that she was feeling sassy. Dean starts shaking his head. I think Beth saying yes to being legally part of our family is the best retirement present I'll ever get, Dean tells his family. Everyone exhausted after laughing and crying so much, so decided to go to the bed. Leland wakes up in the middle of night to the sound of someone crying. Beth! He rushes out of his old room and into his sister's room. Frances was behind him. They both sees her asleep but crying. Frances is already gently waking Beth up gently. What's wrong? Dean says, sticking his out of his bedroom. Beth is having a nightmare. Frances is already slowly waking her up. Go back to sleep, Dad. We got it, Leland says to his dad. Dean nods his head and goes back to the bed. Beth gasps and opens her eyes to see Frances brushing hair out of the bed's face. Then she sees Leland walking to her room with a wet washed cloth. Beth sits up and takes the white cloth from the Leland's hand. He walks to other side of her bed and gets in. "What happened in your dream?" Francis asks Beth, taking the clothes from her. Francis slowly pet Beth's neck, softly trying to cool it off. Beth hesitates and then tells her sister, "You guys left me." The family that Beth was getting adopted into all had dark brown or black hair, naturally tanner skin, and brown eyes. "Never," Frances signs as she gets up. She takes the cloth and puts it in the laundry basket in the bathroom, and then she gets in bed with her two other siblings. Leland already was asleep. Beth was dozing off, exhausted. Frances gets in and waits for the Beth to fall asleep before she does, and then they fall asleep, cuddling and then hopping into each other's arms like a pack of wolves, and then they fall asleep.